That ain't him, the marshal said when the bounty hunter dropped the body in the dust. You killed the wrong man. Cyrus Vane didn't move. The rope still hung from his saddle horn, frayed where it had bound the dead man's wrists through 3 days of hard riding. Flies were already finding the wound under the corpse's jaw. The sun overhead was the color of a forge fire, and the main street of Redemption, Arizona, had emptied the moment Cyrus rode in, dragging the second horse behind him. Look again, Cyrus said. Marshal Holloway didn't look. He was staring at Cyrus instead, the way a man stares at a rattlesnake he hasn't decided how to kill. Behind him, the saloon doors swung half open, and faces filled the gap. Pale, sweating, watching. I knew Eli Mercer for 15 years, Holloway said. Drank with him. Buried his wife. That man on the ground is Eli Mercer. And Eli Mercer never robbed a stage in his life. Then he won't mind being looked at. A breath of wind moved down the street, lifting a curl of dust between them. Somewhere, a shutter banged. Cyrus stepped back from the body and let the marshal see all of it. The scuffed boots, the powder-burned coat, the silver ring on the dead man's left hand that caught the light like a coin tossed into a well. Holloway's throat moved. Just once. Where'd you take him? The marshal asked, quieter now. 3 miles south of Tanaja Pass. He was sitting by a fire alone. He went for the pistol before I said a word. Eli Mercer don't carry a pistol. This one did. Cyrus reached into his saddlebag and pulled out the gun, holding it flat across his palm. It was a Colt Navy, the grip carved with a small cross. He let Holloway look at it for a long moment. The marshal's face did something complicated then, a tightening around the eyes that wasn't surprise. It was recognition trying not to be. Put that away, Holloway said. Why? Put it away, Vane. Cyrus slid the pistol back into the bag, but slowly, so that everyone watching from the saloon and the dry goods porch and the upper windows of the Stockman Hotel could see he was the one deciding when. He had been in towns like this before. He knew the smell of them. It was the smell of a secret that had grown too large for the men holding it. I'll need the bounty, Cyrus said. $200. Posted by Wells Fargo in Tucson. The notice said dead or alive. The notice was wrong. The notice was signed by a federal judge. Holloway turned away. He walked 3 steps toward the jailhouse, stopped, and came back. He was a man of about 50, gray at the temples, with the kind of belly that comes from too many free meals at the hotel. There was a star on his vest that had been polished recently. Cyrus noticed that. A man who polished his star in a town this small was a man who wanted to be reminded of something. Come inside, Holloway said. Leave him out here. I'll send the undertaker. He stays where he is until I'm paid. Vane. $200, Marshal. Or a wire to Tucson. Either one ends this faster. A door opened across the street. A woman stepped out of the milliner's shop and stopped on the boards as though she'd walked into glass. She was perhaps 30, dark-haired, wearing a gray dress with a black ribbon at the throat. She looked at the body in the dust, and then she looked at Cyrus, and her hand went to her mouth and stayed there. Get back inside, Mrs. Mercer, Holloway called. She didn't move. Cyrus watched her. He had ridden into a great many towns with a great many dead men, and he knew the shape of a widow's grief. This wasn't it. This was the look of a woman who had been expecting bad news from a different direction and was now trying to recalculate. Ma'am, Cyrus said, touching the brim of his hat. Her hand dropped from her mouth. That's not my husband, she said. The street went so still that Cyrus could hear the flies. Sarah, Holloway said, don't. That is not Eli. Her voice was thin but steady. Eli has a scar across his right eyebrow from the war. That man does not. Cyrus crouched beside the body. He pushed the hat back from the dead man's face. The skin was gray and bloodied, but unmarked above the right eye. Clean as a child's. He stood again. He looked at the marshal, and then at the woman, and then up at the windows of the Stockman Hotel, where one curtain had just twitched closed. So who is he? Cyrus asked. No one answered. Marshal, Cyrus said. Who is the man I killed? Holloway's hand had drifted to the butt of his pistol. Not drawing. Just resting. The way a man rests his hand when he's still choosing. Get on your horse, Vane, the marshal said. Ride out. I'll wire Tucson myself. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. You won't get the bounty, but you'll get the trail back, and that's more than some men get in Redemption. He drew on me first. Then ride. Cyrus didn't move. He was looking at the silver ring on the dead man's finger. The ring was too fine for a trail rider. It had a small letter engraved on it, half hidden by dried blood. He couldn't read the letter from where he stood, but he could see it was not an E. He had this gun, Cyrus said slowly, and that ring, and $140 in gold coin in his saddlebag. He was sitting alone in a place no honest man rides through. He went for me before I drew. I want to know who paid him to be Eli Mercer. The marshal's hand stayed on the pistol. The woman in the gray dress took one step off the boards into the street. Her shadow fell across the dead man's boots. Marshal Holloway, she said, I want to see that ring. Sarah, I want to see that ring. She walked past Cyrus, knelt in the dust without caring what it did to her dress, and lifted the dead man's hand. She turned the ring once around the cold finger. Her breath caught. When she looked up at Cyrus, her face had gone the color of old paper. This ring, she whispered, belonged to my brother. And my brother has been missing for 6 years. Behind them, the curtain in the upper window of the Stockman Hotel twitched again, and this time it did not fall back into place. Cyrus Vane had been paid to bring in dead men for 9 years, and in those 9 years he had learned one thing better than any other. A town's silence is louder than its noise. Redemption was screaming at him in silence now. Sarah Mercer rose from the dust with the ring closed in her fist. She did not look at the marshal. She looked at Cyrus, and there was something in her eyes that wasn't grief or fear. It was the wild, dangerous edge of a person who has just been given proof of something she had been forbidden to say out loud. Walk with me, she said. Mrs. Mercer, Holloway began. Walk with me, Mr. Vane. Cyrus looked at the marshal. The marshal's hand was still on his pistol. There were now 4 men standing behind him on the boards, men who had not been there a minute ago, men with the look of cattlemen who didn't run cattle. One of them had a Winchester laid casual across his forearm. Cyrus made his choice the way he had learned to make choices on the trail, not because it was right, but because it was the one he could live with if it went wrong. I'll come for the bounty in an hour, he said to Holloway, or I'll come for an answer. Your call, Marshal. He led his horse to the rail outside the milliner's shop. Sarah Mercer was already inside. He tied the reins, took his rifle from the scabbard, and followed her in. The little bell over the door rang once. He closed the door behind him and slid the bolt. The shop smelled of camphor and dried lavender. Bolts of cloth were stacked along the wall. A young girl, maybe 12, looked up from behind the counter. Sarah's daughter, the same dark hair, the same careful eyes. Mama, go upstairs, Lillian. Stay there. The girl went. Sarah waited until the steps overhead had stopped. Then she sat down on the stool behind the counter and opened her hand. The silver ring sat in her palm like a wound. My brother's name was Thomas Reese, she said. He came west to work for the Carroll Land and Cattle Company 6 years ago. He wrote me 1 letter, then nothing. I went to the marshal 3 times. 3 times Holloway told me Thomas had moved on to California, that men do that I should let him go. I never believed him. But Eli, my husband, Eli asked me to stop asking. Why? Because Eli works for the Carroll Land and Cattle Company. Cyrus set the rifle against the counter. He took off his hat and turned it once in his hands. He thought about the dead man in the street, the carved cross on the pistol grip, the gold coins in the saddlebag, and the way Marshal Holloway had recognized that pistol without admitting it. Mrs. Mercer, he said, where is your husband right now? He rode out 4 days ago. Said he was driving cattle to the railhead. He's done it many times. He'd be back tomorrow, the day after at the latest. Did he take a Colt Navy with a cross on the grip? She closed her eyes. When she opened them, 2 tears had come loose without her permission. Eli's father carved that cross, she said. Eli has carried that gun since the war. Cyrus said nothing for a long moment. Outside the window, the 4 men from the boards had moved into the street. They were standing around the body now, but they were watching the door of the milliner's shop. The man I shot was not your husband, Cyrus said. But he had your husband's gun, and he was wearing your brother's ring. Yes. Then your husband is either dead, or he is the one who put that man on that trail wearing those things. Sarah Mercer looked at him. The tears had stopped. Her face had hardened into something Cyrus had seen before in women who had spent years swallowing what they knew. Eli is not a killer, she said. But Eli is afraid of the Carrows. The Carrows own the bank, the freight office, half the cattle in 3 counties, and 4 men of Marshal Holloway's choosing. Whatever Eli has done, he did it because someone made him do it, or someone has done it to him. She nodded once. Her hand closed again over the ring. "Mr. Vane," she said, "I have $90 saved. It's all the money in this shop. If you ride out of redemption right now, you can keep it. I will not blame you. You came here to collect a bounty. There is no bounty here. There is only my family, and I have no right to ask you to bleed for it." Cyrus looked at the money she set on the counter. 3 small stacks, neat, the bills smooth flat. The kind of savings a woman built dime by dime while pretending not to. He thought about the years he had spent riding into towns and out of them, never staying long enough to know what his bounties had left behind. He thought about a brother who had written one letter and then nothing. He thought about a man sitting alone by a fire at Tanaja Pass with another man's ring on his finger. He pushed the money back across the counter. "Keep it," he said. "I came for $200. I'll leave when I've earned it." "Mr. Vane, where is the Caro place?" She drew a breath. "North, 8 miles up the Verde Road. Big white house. You'll see the cattle before the house." "And your husband? If he's alive, where would they keep him?" "There's a line shack at the edge of their range. Eli used to ride there when he wanted to be alone. If they wanted to hide a man, that's where." Cyrus put his hat back on. He picked up the rifle. "Stay in the shop," he said. "Bolt the door behind me. Don't open it until you hear my voice or the marshal's. And if it's the marshal's, you make him say my name first." "Why?" "Because if Holloway comes through this door without me, it means he picked his side. And it ain't yours." He unbolted the door. Outside, the 4 men were still standing in the street, and one of them had begun to walk toward the shop. In the upper window of the Stockman Hotel, the curtain had been pulled fully open now. A man stood there in a dark coat, watching. He did not move when Cyrus stepped out. He only lifted a hand and made a small gesture, almost lazy, as though brushing away a fly. The 4 men in the street stopped walking. They stepped aside. They let Cyrus pass. That was when he understood that the trap had not been sprung yet. It had only been baited. Cyrus rode north out of Redemption with the sun sliding down behind his right shoulder. He did not take the Verde Road. He took the dry wash that ran parallel to it, half a mile west, where the mesquite grew thick enough to swallow a horseman. He had been followed before. He knew what it sounded like when a man on a horse was trying not to be heard. 2 riders, maybe 3, hanging back a quarter mile, matching his pace. He let them follow for 4 miles. Then he turned his horse into a side draw, dismounted, tied the reins to a juniper, and climbed the bank with the rifle in his hands. He flattened himself behind a tumble of red rock and waited. The light was going gold. A hawk turned in the high air, slow as a hand on a clock. The first rider came up the wash at a careful walk. He was the one with the Winchester, the man from the boards in town. The second rider was 10 yards behind, on a paint horse, his face shadowed under a flat-brimmed hat. Cyrus let them pass below him. When they had gone 20 yards, he stood up. "That's far enough." Both riders froze. The one on the paint reached for his rifle. Cyrus put a shot 2 inches above his hand, and the rifle stayed where it was. "Drop them in the dirt," Cyrus said. "Both of you. Slow." They dropped the rifles. The pistols, too, when he said it again. The man with the Winchester was the older of the 2, lean and wind-burned, with a face that had been broken at the nose a long time ago. "You boys ride for Caro?" Cyrus asked. The wind-burned man spat. "We ride for who pays. Same thing in this country." Cyrus came down the bank, keeping the rifle level. "Where's Eli Mercer?" "Don't know the name." "Try again." The man on the paint horse said nothing. His eyes were moving, to the wash behind Cyrus, then to the ridge above, then back. It was the look of a man waiting for something to happen. Cyrus heard the third horse a half-second before he saw it. The third rider came over the ridge at a full gallop, pistol drawn, already firing. The first shot tore a sleeve. The second cracked off the red rock beside Cyrus's head and threw chips of stone into his cheek. Cyrus went sideways and down into the dry wash. He came up on one knee and fired once. The third rider's hat lifted off his head, and the man slumped sideways out of the saddle. The horse kept running. The wind-burned man was off his horse and going for his pistol in the dirt. Cyrus shot him in the shoulder. The man spun half around and sat down hard. The man on the paint horse had already kicked his animal into motion. He was riding north as fast as the paint could carry him. Cyrus did not shoot him. He let him go. He wanted at least one of them to reach the Caro place ahead of him. He walked over to the wind-burned man. The man was holding his shoulder with the other hand, his face the color of tallow. "Where is Eli Mercer?" "Line shack." North Fork of the creek. 2 miles up. The man's voice came through his teeth. He's alive. Was alive this morning. They was waiting to see if you came back from Tanaja or not. Came back with what? With the body. They paid that fella to ride out wearing Eli's gun. Wanted you to bring him in dead, swear on the bounty, and ride on. Then Eli stays gone. Stays a thief. Stays a story. Why? The man laughed, short and bitter. Because Eli wouldn't sign. Sign what? The water rights. Caro wants the creek. Eli's the only homesteader left who can stop the deed. Caro figured if Eli was a wanted man, the claim'd be void. Marshal already had the papers drawn. Cyrus stood very still. Above them, the hawk had finished its slow turn and was sliding south now, toward redemption. And the ring, Cyrus said. Thomas Reese's ring? The man's eyes flicked away. Talk. Reese was the last one. 6 years back. He wouldn't sign neither. Caro put him in a mine shaft up at the Buckhorn. Boss kept the ring 'cause he liked it. When he heard a bounty hunter was coming through, he told Holloway to put that ring on the dead man too. To tie up loose ends. To let Mrs. Mercer see it and think her brother had gone bad. To break her so she'd sign her husband's claim away when the widow papers came through. Cyrus closed his eyes for one breath. The hawk was gone. The sky above the wash had begun to bruise. What's your name? Doyle. Doyle, you're going to ride back to redemption. You're going to tell Marshal Holloway that I'm coming for the line shack, and then I'm coming for him. You tell him he can meet me in the street tomorrow at sunrise, or he can run, but if he runs I will find him, and I have 9 years of finding men. You understand? He won't run. I didn't ask if he'd run. I asked if you understood. I understand. Cyrus helped him onto his horse. He bound the shoulder ruff with a strip torn from the man's own shirt. Then he picked up the 3 rifles, slung 2 of them over his own saddle, and broke the 3rd across a rock. The 3rd rider was dead in the wash. Cyrus turned the body face up. He didn't know the man. He covered the face with the man's own hat and left him. Then he rode north. The line shack stood in a hollow of pinyon at the head of the creek. It was full dark by the time he reached the ridge above it. He smelled the smoke first, a thin gray thread from the chimney, and then he saw the lamp, a small yellow square in the back window. 1 horse in the lean-to. 1 man on the porch with a rifle across his knees, half asleep. Cyrus came down through the trees on foot. He took the porch man with the butt of the rifle, fast and quiet, and laid him in the dirt before the man's hands could close on his gun. He stepped over him and pushed the door open with the muzzle. Inside, on a straw tick against the back wall, a man was tied at the wrists and ankles. He had a beard 4 days grown. There was a scar across his right eyebrow. His eyes opened when the door creaked, and they were the eyes of a man who had spent 4 days deciding how he was going to die. Eli Mercer? Cyrus said. The man's mouth was dry. He had to try twice. Who sent you? Your wife. Eli Mercer began, very quietly, to weep. Cyrus cut the ropes with his belt knife. Eli Mercer's wrists were rubbed raw to a wet shine. He tried to stand, and his legs went out from under him. Cyrus caught him under the arms and lowered him back onto the straw. He fetched the tin cup from the table, filled it from the water bucket, and held it for the other man to drink. Eli drank in slow swallows, the way a man drinks who has been rationed. Slow, Cyrus said. Slow now? We've got a ride ahead. My wife. She's in her shop. Doors bolted. Daughter upstairs. She's the reason I'm standing here. Eli closed his eyes. A breath went out of him that seemed to have been held for 4 days. Cyrus left him sitting and walked the cabin in a quick circle. He took the lamp down from its hook and turned it low. He checked the man on the porch, still out, breathing, hands now tied with his own belt, and dragged him inside out of the cold. He bolted the door. He laid the rifles where he could reach them. Then he sat down on the floor across from Eli with his back to the wall and let the cabin be quiet for a moment. The fire in the small stove ticked. Outside, an owl called once in the pinyon and got no answer. You were a soldier, Cyrus said. Eli touched the scar above his right eye without thinking. Antietam, then Cold Harbor. Then I came home, and there wasn't a home. So I came west and met Sarah in St. Louis. She was 18. I was 26, and I had nothing but a horse and that pistol. She married me anyway. A weak laugh. Her brother Thomas came out a year after we did. He was supposed to make our fortune. Caro hired him to survey the upper creek. And he never came back. Holloway told us he went to California. We knew he hadn't. Sarah knew. I knew. But there's no proving a thing in redemption that Caro doesn't want proved. Eli's hands were shaking on the cup. He set it down. I should have left this country years ago. We had a daughter. I told myself the homestead was for her. The creek runs year-round. There isn't another like it on the Verde. I should have known they would never let us keep it. Cyrus reached into his coat and brought out the silver ring. He set it on the floor between them. Eli looked at it for a long time without touching it. When he reached out at last, his fingers were very gentle, the way a man touches something he has already buried. Thomas, he whispered, your wife has it. I borrowed it back from her so you'd see it. Where did you find it? On a man who tried to be you. They paid him to wear your gun and your brother-in-law's ring and die on a trail where a bounty hunter would find him. They paid me, in their heads, to be the gun that killed Eli Mercer for them. Then Holloway calls it a misidentification. The bounty doesn't pay. Your widow signs the homestead away thinking her husband was a thief and her brother was a ghost, and the creek belongs to Caro before the next thaw. Eli pressed the ring against his forehead. His shoulders shook. He made no sound. Cyrus looked away to give him the privacy of it, and watched the lamp flame instead, the small steady thing of it inside the glass. My brother was a brave man, Eli said after a while. He came west with a violin and a case. He played at our wedding. Sarah said he played at her birth, when he was 9 years old, on the same instrument. What happened to the violin? Caro had his men burn his cabin. Said it was lightning. We never found it. You'll find a place to bury him, Cyrus said. Properly. With his name on a stone. That's something. That's something. The two men sat in silence for a long minute. The man on the floor by the door groaned and shifted. Cyrus glanced at him, decided he would keep, and looked back at Eli. There's a thing I have to tell you, Cyrus said. Before we ride. Tell me. I've brought in 23 men in 9 years. Some of them were guilty as sin, and some of them were guilty of less than the poster said. I never asked which was which. I told myself the law had asked the question for me. I told myself the bounty was a clean wage. The man I shot at Tanaja Pass, I didn't know his name. I still don't. He drew first, and that's a thing I can stand on. But he drew first because he was paid to draw first by men who knew the kind of man I am. They used me, Mercer. They knew exactly what tool I was. Eli looked at him steadily. And what kind of tool is that? The kind that doesn't ask the second question. You're asking now. I'm asking now. Eli was quiet. Then he said, my wife sent you. That means she believed you'd ask. Sarah is not often wrong about people. Cyrus took off his hat. He set it on the floor beside the rifles. He ran a hand through his hair, which had gone gray at the temples without his noticing when. I'd like to make it right, he said. I'd like to know I made one of these rides right before I'm done. Then make it right by riding back with me alive. That's the only making right there is. Cyrus nodded. He picked up his hat. He put it on. He stood, and as he stood he held out his hand. Eli Mercer looked at the hand for a moment as though he had forgotten what hands meant. Then he took it. Cyrus pulled him to his feet, and this time Eli's legs held. Can you ride? To my wife? I can ride to the moon. To your wife is closer. They left the cabin at moonrise. The porch guard they tied to the bunk and left with the water bucket within his reach. Cyrus saddled the man's horse for Eli, and they rode south down the creek. Not fast, because Eli was weak and the night was cold, and there was no longer a need for speed. Doyle would have reached redemption by now. Holloway would know. At a turn of the creek, Eli pulled up his horse. Vane. Yes. Tomorrow at sunrise, in the street. That's what Doyle will have told them. That's what they'll be ready for. I know. I'm coming with you. Cyrus looked at him a long moment in the moonlight. Eli Mercer was 40 pounds underweight and 4 days from death, and his hands were still shaking on the reins. You sure? It's my brother's ring, Eli said. It's my wife's shop. It's my daughter's creek. I'm sure. They rode on through the cold blue dark, 2 men where there had been one, and behind them the lined shack stood empty against the pinions with the lamp still burning low. They came into redemption at first gray light. The street was already waiting for them. Marshal Holloway stood in the middle of it, the polished star catching what little light there was, a shotgun broken open over his forearm. Behind him, 3 men, Doyle was not among them, stood in a loose line, rifles low. On the porch of the Stockman Hotel, in a dark coat with a velvet collar, stood a tall man with white hair and a face like a closed ledger. Caro himself, then. Cyrus had wondered if he would come down. The milliner's shop door was open. Sarah Mercer stood on the boards, and beside her, half hidden in her skirts, the girl Lillian. Sarah's hand was on her daughter's shoulder, and her eyes were fixed past the marshal, past Caro, on the second rider coming up the street. Eli Mercer rode beside Cyrus, very straight in the saddle now, the borrowed pistol on his hip and the silver ring on a thong around his neck, where his wife could see it from where she stood. Far enough, Holloway called. Cyrus stopped his horse 20 paces from the marshal. Eli stopped beside him. "You brought the wrong man back yesterday, Marshal," Cyrus said. "You see, I corrected the error." Holloway's eyes were not on Cyrus. They were on Eli. There was a thing happening in the marshal's face that was not quite fear and not quite shame, but had elements of both, and the proportions kept shifting. "Eli," Holloway said. "Eli, listen to me. You sat at my table, Sam," Eli said. "You ate my wife's bread. You told her brother went to California. Eli, where is Thomas?" Holloway did not answer. Up on the hotel porch, Caro stirred. His voice came down the street smooth as oil on water. "Mr. Vane, you are a long way from Tucson and a long way from your bounty. I am a reasonable man. There is $200 in this town with your name on it, plus another $500 for the trouble of misunderstanding. You can be riding south with $700 in your saddlebag inside of 10 minutes. Or you can be lying in this street inside of 2. "Mr. Caro," Cyrus said, 6 years ago you put a man named Thomas Reese in a mine shaft at the Buckhorn. Yesterday you paid a stranger to wear that man's ring and die in my hands. I will not be riding south." A pause. The wind moved a tumble of straw down the street. "Then you will be lying in it," Caro said, and he lifted his hand. The 3 riflemen brought their rifles up. What happened then happened in the space of perhaps 4 heartbeats, but Cyrus remembered it afterward in slow, ordered pieces, the way a man remembers the last hand of a card game he won. Doyle stepped out of the alley between the dry goods store and the bank. He was pale from his shoulder wound, and his good hand held a pistol, and the pistol was not pointed at Cyrus. It was pointed at Caro 3 riflemen, from behind. "Put him down, boys," Doyle said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. "I rode for who paid. He don't pay enough for this." The 3 riflemen hesitated. One of them, the youngest, lowered his rifle first. The other 2 followed, more slowly, but they followed. Marshal Holloway stood frozen, the broken shotgun still over his arm. Caro, on the hotel porch, reached inside his coat. He was fast for an old man. Cyrus was faster. The shot took Caro in the chest before the small pistol had cleared the velvet collar. The old man stepped back once against the hotel wall, looked down at himself as if mildly surprised by an unpaid bill, and slid down to sit on the boards. He did not get up. The street went very still. Cyrus did not lower his rifle. He looked at Holloway. "Marshal," he said, "you can close that shotgun, or you can lay it down." Holloway laid it down. He did it slowly, with both hands, as though setting down something heavier than a gun. When it was in the dust, he straightened, and for a moment Cyrus thought he might go for the pistol on his hip. Then the marshal pulled the star off his vest instead, looked at it once in his palm, and let it fall beside the shotgun. "I'll wire Tucson myself," Holloway said. "I'll write what's true. I'll ride to the Buckhorn and bring Thomas Reese home if there's enough of him left to bring." His voice cracked on the last word. "Eli, Sarah, there is no asking your pardon. I know it. I'll do the work anyway." Eli Mercer did not answer him. He swung down off his horse. He walked past the marshal without looking at him. He walked to the boards in front of the milliner's shop, and Sarah came down off the boards into the dust to meet him, and Lillian came after her, and the 3 of them stood in the middle of Redemption's main street with their arms around each other and did not move for a long time. Cyrus put the rifle across his saddle. He watched them. Then he looked away, because some things a man is not entitled to watch. The bounty notice from Tucson was rescinded by wire that afternoon. In its place, 3 weeks later, came another notice. For Marshal Samuel Holloway, voluntarily surrendered, charged with accessory to murder in the death of Thomas Reese, and for the 4 ranch hands who had ridden under Caro name. The Caro Land and Cattle Company's holdings were broken up by the territorial court inside a year. The water rights to the Upper Verde Creek were registered, finally and forever, to Eli and Sarah Mercer and to their heirs. Thomas Reese came home in a pine box from the Buckhorn shaft. He was buried under a juniper on the rise above the creek, with a stone that bore his name and a small carved violin beneath it. The day they set the stone, Sarah laid the silver ring on the dirt above him and left it there. Cyrus Vane stayed in redemption through the trial. He slept in the loft of the Mercer barn. He mended a fence, broke a colt, and taught the girl Lillian how to clean a rifle. He never collected the $200. He never asked for it. On the morning he left, Sarah Mercer pressed something into his hand at the gate. He did not open his fist until he was a mile down the road. It was a small silver token, cut from a coin, with 2 letters scratched into it. TR, for the brother he had brought home, and for the trail he had ridden right at last. Years later, when travelers asked at the Mercer place about the gray-bearded man in the daguerreotype above the mantel, Sarah would say only, "He came in once with the wrong man. He rode out with the right one." And out past the porch, past the juniper, past the stone with the violin carved on it, the creek would still be running, narrow and bright, and theirs, toward a horizon where one rider, long ago, had turned his horse south at last and not looked back.